My name is Emma. I am 25 years old, and people think my mother ruined my childhood. They are wrong. She did not ruin it. She designed it. Me real mother died when I was 8. That is the version told at gatherings, at dinners, at funerals, where strangers nod sympathetically. Truth is, Queeter, she did not disappear suddenly. She faded slowly, like someone learning they are no longer needed. By the time she was gone, the house had already rearranged itself. Me father remarried within a year. People praised his strength. Men are praised for survival. Women are judged for absence. Me stepmother arrived with organization, schedules, rules, a smile that knew exactly when to appear. She never raised her voice. She never left marks. She never broke. Object. She broke context. Every mistake I made was framed as concern. Emma needs discipline. Emma needs guidance. Emma is sensitive. Sensitive is the word adults use when a child notices too much. She noticed everything. How she spoke softly to my father, then slightly louder to me. Never enough for witness. How she corrected my posture, my tone, my memories. That is not how it happened. Emma, you are remembering wrong. Marie is the first thing power attacks. He learned to stop arguing, not because she was right, but because resistance feeds attention, and attention was her oxygen at school. Teachers adored her. Like a devoted mother, so involved, so patty, and patience is convincing. It suggests virtue even when it hides control. At home, she documented everything: report cards, medical appointments, behavior. No test. Documentation creates authority. Authority erases doubt. He learned something important before I was 10. Adults do not believe children. They believe system. So I became a system. He observed, recorded, categorized in it. On paper, in silence. When she humiliated me, I thanked her. Gratitude disarms cruelty. When she punished me, I apologized. Apologies confuse manipulator. She thought she was shaping me. She was training. Maybe 13. I understood leverage, not money, not secrets. Reputation. Do not fear evil, they fear being uncertain. And my stepmother above all needed certainty that she was good, that she was admired, that she was true. Stady did not hate her. Hittered is loud, messy. Expasinji waited because some people do not deserve to be destroyed. They deserve to be doubt. And doubt, once planted, never stops growing. My stepmother understood one thing instinctively: people forgive cruelty. They do not forgive incompetence. So she never appeared cruel. She appeared Kappa Blush. Organized charity events, school fundraisers, community dinners. Her name appeared on lists, committees, thank you cards. Visibility creates immunity at parent-teacher meetings. She arrived early with folders color-coded. Tabulad. She asked the right questions about curriculum, about development, about emotional well-being. Questions that implied investment, not control. Teachers looked at her, then at me, as if checking Ellen meant I learned to note at home. Her interest had edges. Chose my clothes because presentation matters. She selected my extracurriculars because potential must be guided. Piano debate, volunteering. Gack device that photographed Welly was not allowed to quit. Quitting suggests instability. Instability reflects poorlish. Never said that she never had. Tutorials do not need explanation when punishment is consistent. Punishment was never dramatic. No shouting, no slam doors, just withdrawal. Silence at dinner, neutral responses, corrective smiles. Kind of silence that makes a child audit herself. He learned to replay my day, searching for errors before she did. That was her greatest success. Outsourced discipline to my own min. Me father remained peripheral, not absent, just deferred. Trusted her systems. Trust grows easily when someone else manages the details. She believed peace meant health. Peace is often just quiet obedience at public events. She held my shoulder lightly, as if anchoring. Mima is shy, she would say, but brilliant. Compliments paired with limitation create dependency. People smiled, touched my hair, praised her patience. I smiled back, practiced. Controlled. Be 15. I understood her priority as image stability. Recognition. Love was optionally. Began to test boundaries, not overtly, never directly. Forgot assignments. Once tweet. She reacted with concern, then disappointment, then documentation. Caution first. Always concern. Concern is unassailably overheard. Phone calls with counselors with advisor. Seema seems distracted. I am worried. Teenage years are fragile. Fragile is another word that sounds caring and removes agency. Framed my behavior before I cooled. He learned then that narratives move faster when told by adults. So I stopped providing material. He became predictable, reliable. Boring. Predictability starves control. She relaxed. That was a mistake. People who feel safe stop watching. He began building something else outside the house. Teachers who noticed not just my grades, But my restraint friends, parents who saw how little space I took, counselors who heard what I did not say and never accused, never complain needy ask questions. Is it normal to feel responsible for harmony? Is it wrong to feel invisible at home? Questions invite reflection. Accusations invite defense. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, people began to tilt their heads. When my stepmother spoke, not doubt, not yet just curiosity. Curiosity is the first crack. At 18, I left for university. She cried publicly. Of course I hugged her, thanked her for everything. The graded. When excessive feels performative. A poll. Remember that feeling distance changed things without proximity. Her control weakened without control. Her behavior sharpened. She called often, asked detailed questions. Where are you? Who are you with? Why did you choose that? Concern. Againi answered calmly. Brief lion formation is power. I gave her Nanesh began speaking about me more than to meddling relatives, colleagues. How hard it was to let go, how worried she was. Worry repeated becomes suspicion about me. About Harry did not correct any and I never. Dobkaus. When people begin to notice, they want to believe it was their idea and I was patient, very patient. University did not free me. It clarified. Mid-distance strips emotion from memory. What remains is paternity. Stop thinking of my stepmother as a person and started thinking of her as a structure. Restrictors do not hate, they function. She continued her outreach. Weekly messages, concern disguised as care. Have you eaten? Are you sleeping? You sound tired. Tired is useful. It suggests weakness. Weakness invites intervention. I responded late, not rude. Just Eliadele creates imbalance. People who control need immediacy. Learned that from Harry. Joined nothing that required explanation. I avoided posts, photos, digital presents and settles. Narrators. They need material. She began filling gaps. Speaking for Mima is overwhelmed. She works too hard. She forgets to collaborate. Statement positioned her as the attentive. 09 never contradicted her. Contradiction creates conflict. Conflict clarifies. Daisy needed bludgeoning. My second year, I met Professor Lani. He taught ethics, but more importantly, he watched how students answered not what they said, but what they avoid. After class one day, he asked why I never spoke about family. Not accusatory, just curious. He said, some systems only work if you do not interrupt them. Smiled, not amused. Interested. Wrote me a recommendation for a research assistant. She present are quiet endorsements. They bypass reputation. Through him I met people who valued restraint over performance. People who noticed when someone explained too much. Me stepmother visited on unannounced. Concern does not. Schedulesh commented on my apartment. Sparse, clean. Contraled. She asked about friends, romantic interests. Questions framed as updates, not inquiries. He answered factually. No narrative, no emotion. She frowned slightly. I pretended not to notice. Eat dinner. She spoke to my professors. Before I could, she praised my discipline, my focus, my sensitivity. Same words always. The same words. He watched their reaction. Spotlit, neutral, observant. After she left, one of them asked if she worried often. Often is relative. He said, she worries publicly. That sentence stayed in the room. He began to understand something important. People do not need proof. They need permission. Permission to doubt. He never framed her as cruel. That would require defense. He framed her as anxious. Sanctity is believable and exhausting. During holidays, I returned home briefly. Short visits. Neutral. Tanesh intensified. Gifts. Advice. Warning. Scare escalates when control weakens. She began documenting me again. Mails, suggestions, links to articles. Emma, you should read this. Emma, you should consider. Thought. He forwarded nothing. Save Nathinji let others see own email accidentally. CCD to my father. Another to a relative. Mistakes happen. Apologize profusely. Ver apology signals awareness. Family dinners became strained not because of conflict but because of pauses are where people think filled them. Quickly explaining. Clarifying. Explaining too much is a confession. People sense without understanding. I stayed. Silence is not absence. It is pressure. Be graduation. People spoke to me separately, asking how I was. Really answered honestly but narrowly. Am fine. I am independent. I am grateful. Again, but now it sounded deliberate to me. Stepmother began to notice. Not accusations, not confrontation, just fewer invitations, shorter conversations, delayed responses. Reacted by being more helpful, more presentful. When unrequested feels intrusive. Intrusion reframed as care is where trust begins to erode. Asked me once direct. Lido, you think I worry? To make direct questions reveal insecurity. Said worry is your language. Did not like that and swore people Who control narratives? Hate metaphor. From that moment I knew she felt its shift. The subtle realignment of attention. She was no longer being admired, she was being assessed, and assessment is irreversible. By the time I noticed the shift, it had already been noticed by others. Control rarely disappears. It only becomes visible. My stepmother adjusted her behavior not because she sensed rebellion, but because she sensed observation. There is a difference. Rebellion invites suppression. Observation invites performance. She became softer in public, more self-aware. She laughed at herself, corrected her tone mid-sentence. You worry too much, she would say, smiling. I know that self-critique offered early is a defense mechanism, but people did not respond the same way. They smiled politely, not warmly. Warmth is spontaneous. Politeness is measured at family gatherings. She spoke less about me and more about herself. Her stress, her exhaustion, her sacrifice. Sacrificious is compelling until repeated repetition turns virtue into currency. Watched conversations shorten when she spoke at length. Noticed how people glanced at me after she explained my behavior, as if waiting for confirmation or contradiction. I offered neither. Silence is not passive, it is strategic. Increased physical proximity, touches on my arm, my shoulder, my back. Gestures meant to communicate unity, but unity does not need demonstration. Demons implies doubt. My father noticed something was off. Not enough to intervene, enough to retreat. Men retreat when dynamics become ambiguous. Ambiguity threatens simplicity. I deferred more decisions to her, avoided conflict, called it peace. Peace often favors the one already holding power at home. Her tone sharp and ednut, cruel, not loud. Presses. Emma, you seem distant. Emma, are you angry? Emma, did I do something wrong? Questions framed as accountability are invitations to confession. He offered. No. I answered, calmly, factually, without emotion. I am not angry. No, nothing is wrong. No, you did not do anything. Truth can still be disarming. She did not know what to correct. Control depends on identifying deviazione. Gave her non-esh. Begin narrating for me. Aganema is very private. She has always been independent. Independent sounded like praise, but independence threatens caretakers who need relevancy. Watch people respond. Some nodded, some hesitated. Hesitation is where doubt lives. During one dinner, a relative asked me directly if I felt supported growing up. My stepmother laughed before I answered. Of course she was. She said I gave everything to Harry. Smiled, waited, then answered she did everything she thought was right. Hot sentence altered the room. Hot implies intention, not correctness. It suggested effort without Anderson. Meant. Me stepmother noticed. Her smile tightened just briefly. After that, she became careful. Careful is dangerous. It slows reaction time. She rehearsed statements. Filtered concern. Filtered care feels artificiality. Sense artificiality even when they cannot explain it. Asked me one night if I resented harassment is an emotional accusation. It demands denial or admissione. Offered neither. He said, I am grateful. Gratitude again, but now gratitude sounded deliberate. Betterate. Gratitude feels contractual. She did not sleep well after thought. He heard her pacing late at night. Control struggles when outcomes detach from a fortune. Was trying harder and receiving less. That imbalance unsettles people who measure worth through response. Began consulting friends, counselors, book show to connect with adult children. Connection framed as technique never works. It is always notice. I'd be the end of that year. Something irreversible had occurred. People were no longer responding to her. They were responding around her. She was included but no longer central. That is how power fattest, not through removal but through irrelevancy. And she felt I could see it in the way she watched me, not with authority but with uncertainty. Annunciation terrifies those who once controlled outcomes. Was losing nothing tangible, but she was losing narrative dominance. And once narrative slips, trust follows slowly, quietly. Without witnesses, doubt does not arrive loudly. It does not accuse. It does not demand attention. It settles like dust on surfaces people touch every day, so familiar they stop noticing, until one day they wipe their finger across and pause. Be the time my stepmother realized something was wrong. Nothing obvious had happened. There was no scandal, no argument, no moment she could point to and say, that is when it started. That is the cruelty of doubt. It has no beginning, only accumulation. She began to sense it in small ways. Phone calls not returned immediately, messages acknowledged with fewer words, invitations phrased vaguely, we will see, let me check in. Commitments are the softest. Refusal. She compensated the way she always had by increasing output. More advice, more concern, more involvement. Control responds to threat by tightenings. Asked people about Me casually. Strategically, haha, is Emma doing? She seems quiet lately. I worry she keeps things inside a concern a game but concern repeated without confirmation starts to sound rehearsedy. Did not contradict her. I did not clarify remain consistent consi. Is the enemy of suspicion, but the ally of doubt when two narratives compete. People side with the one that changes less mine never Changetti worked. I studied. I lived nothing dramatic. Nothing reactive me stepmother, on the other hand, adjusted constantlish. Explained herself, corrected misunderstandings, clarified intention. Clarification is only needed when something feels unclear. Let others notice that at a family gathering. She told a long story about my childhood difficult I was, how sensitive, how she had to learn patience. Story was polished. Practice CD listened quietly when she finished. Someone laughed politely, then asked Mato, "You remember it that way Mori is a dangerous battlefield because everyone assumes it is subjective," I said. I remember being very careful. Careful is not an accusation, it is a revelation. Through shifted curl implies awareness. Awareness implies pressure. Pressure implies Sursumi. Stepmother interrupted. Of course she was careful. She said she was such a thoughtful child. Thoughtful is not the same as careful. People noticed the substitution that night. She confronted Mena angrily. Not directlish said. People seem confused lately about our relationship. Confession is not an emotion. It is a diagnosis. I said I think people interpret things differently. Interpretate removes blame and control. She asked, have I ever made you feel controlled? Controlled is a loaded word. It demands denial or justification. I offered neither. He said you always meant well intent. Agonindent never guarantees trust. She grew quiet. People who rely on certainty do not tolerate ambiguity or that. She became defensive. She explained decisions unprompted, justified past choices, highlighted sacrifice. Sacrificious is effective only when unspoken sacrifice. Sounds like debt collection. He watched people respond. They listened, but they did not reassure. Reassurance is automatic when trust is intact. The absence of reassurance was what frightened her. She began to watch reactions. The way she once watched mind control. Reversing direction is destabilizing. Called me more often. Her voice softer, almost pleading. Do you need anything? Are you okay? I just want to help. Offered repeatedly without request. Feels invasive. I declined. Politely no thank you. I am managing. Managing implies autonomiotomy. Threatens relevances. Tried a different tactic. Public affection. Complacent praise. Stories of pride but praise that arrives late feels compensatory. Feels sense compensation at one event. She hugged me longer than necessary, held my hand. Observers smiled, but some exchanged glances. Intimacy that needs witnesses is never about intimacy. Later, someone asked me privately if things were okay at home. Privately is where doubt goes to. Mature said, things are calm. Calm is not warmth. He nodded. Slowlish could feel it. No, not rejection, not hostility. Distance is the most painful feedback because it offers no argument. She reacted by trying to restore authority. Corrected. People again gave advice, inserted opinions, but authority reclaimed after it fades. Feels aggressive. Aggressing contradicts. Concern. Contradiction erodes. Trusty never spoke against her, never contradicted her. Publicly let her speak. People reveal themselves when they talk. Too much talked. Mori explained, more justified. Each explanation added weight. Doubt does not need evidence. It needs repetition. By the time she realized that something fundamental had shifted, it was too late because the doubt was no longer hers to manage. It belonged to everyone else. Seen doubt, once shared, does not return to its source. Images do not shatter. They fatigue. They bend. Hairline fractures forming where no one thinks to look. By the time a crack is visible, the structure has already adjusted to failing. Me stepmother did not lose control in a single moment. She lost it in increments measured not by events but by responses. People stopped affirming. Her affirmation is reflexive when trust is intact. No, they listen then change the subject. Subject changes are verdicts disguised as politeness compensated by refining. Her imageclithes became more neutral, language more careful, smiles more controlled. Control layered on control eventually becomes visible. Monitored herself constantly. Self-monitoring drains authenticity. Othian chichi is what people trust. Even when flowed, she spoke less, but when she spoke, she emphasized responsibility. Only want what is best. I have always tried to do the right thing. The word always appeared often. Always suggests defense, not confidence. I watched people react. Nods, short affirmations, Eyes drifting, attention is a rejection. Without confrontation at work events, she introduced herself differently as my mother, not stepmother. That shift was intentional. She needed certainty and titles offer. It Somion asked once how long she had raised Mesh answered quickly. Since she was little, since implies ownership. He did not correct her correction. Would absolve her by making it a misunderstanding. She let the phrasing linger. Later someone asked me if that felt accurate. Accuracy is not emotional, it is factual. I said she came into my life when I was 8. Is specific. Specificity grounds reality. Reality interrupts narrative. As me stepmother began to lose invitations, not formally, not completely, but selective. Lismiller gatherings, closed groups, decisions made before she arrived at exclusion rarely announces itself. It simply stops making space. She sensed it and reacted by asserting value. She offered help, resources, connections will offered unsolicited feels, transactional trends, erode relational trust. She started reminding people of what she had done. Reminders convert generosity into leverage. People do not like leverage. When they did not agree to the exchange, her tone sharpened again. Subtly a comment here, a correction. Their sharpness exposed a fort exposed. Insecurity remained unchanged. He showed up. I listened. I spoke. When asked, constancy continued to contrast her fluctuation. Contrast is the most effective mirror. At home she was restless, reorganized, cleaned, rearranged. Scheduleless activity is how anxious people avoid reflection. She asked my father if he noticed anything. He said, people are just busy. Busy is the word people use when they do not want to analyze. If that answer offered no reassurance, if began to document. AG notes lists messages documented returns when control weakened. She showed me messages she had sent to prove her concern. Proof requested signals. Distrust of perception. Conversation had already shifted. She asked me one night if I thought people misunderstood her. Misunderstanding implies innocency. I said, people respond to patterns. Patterns imply repetition. Repetition implies agency. She did not like that. Accused me. Not directlish. Said, you never defend. My defense is required only when attacked. Said no one is attacking youth. It was true and it terrified her because the absence of attack meant the absence of no sides means no loyalty tests. Loyalty tests are how controllers confirm relevance. At them, they drifty noticed. She stopped. Sleeping well. Dark circles. Short temper. Fatigue makes control. Sloppiness reveals intention. She over-explained, then corrected herself. People noticed the correction, not the intention. She became careful, then careless and conscious. Completed the fracture. Be the end of that year. Her image had not collapsed, it had thinned. People did not distrust her completely, simply no longer relied on her. Reliance is the true measure of trust, and she felt it in the way people no longer sought her advice, no longer asked her opinion, no longer deferred. Power does not vanish, it relocates away from those who try to hold it toward those who do not need tone. I was already somewhere else. People who sense power slipping do not let go. They tighten their grip, then call it protection. My stepmother did not collapse. She reorganized. Control adapts before it breaks. She began telling her story again, but differently. Not as a victim, not as a martyr, as a misunderstood woman. Misunderstanding is attractive. It invites correction and sympathy. She spoke carefully, chose words that sounded wounded but dignified. I only ever wanted to help. I guess sometimes love comes out wrong. Wrong is vague. Vagueness invites forgiveness. She began reaching out privately to the same people who had begun to distance themselves one-on-one. Concerned, vulnerable group. Doubt fractures easily into individual reassurance. She tried to reverse the flow, but something had changed. People listened. They did not reassure. Reassurance requires certainty, and certainty had already been damaged. She framed herself as reflective. I've been thinking a lot lately about how I might have been too involved. Admitting to little is another form of control. To involve sounds generous, not intrusive. I watched people nod, but not lean in. Leaning in is trust. Nodding is politeness. She tried to involve me publicly at a gathering. She asked me to speak about how much she had done for me. It was framed as celebration. Celebration is coercive because refusal looks cruel. I understood the trap immediately. I smiled and said she was always very present. Present is not loving, not kind, not supportive, just present. The room paused. She laughed a little too loudly. You see, she said, she's never been very expressive. Expressive is a flaw disguised as explanation. People noticed. Later, someone told me that exchange felt strange. Strange is the word people use when their intuition wakes up. She confronted me again, this time more directly. She asked, "Why do you speak about me like that?" "Like what?" I asked. "Neutrality disarms accusation," she said. Cold. Cold is projection. People accuse others of what they fear being seen. As I said, I speak carefully. Careful is not denial. It is justification. She cried then, real tears, not performance. Fear produces honesty, but honesty does not restore trust. She said, "I feel like you are letting people see me differently." See me differently. She did not say you are lying. She said you are not correcting. Correction is how narratives survive. I said people see what they notice. Notice is uncontrollable. She asked, "Do you want people to think I am a bad mother?" Bad is absolute and easy to deny. I said people rarely think in absolutes. That answer ended the conversation. She realized then that she could not fight me, because I was not fighting. I was standing still while the ground shifted. After that, she changed tactics again. She tried warmth, unconditional warmth, sudden generosity, gifts, compliments, praise, but warmth that arrives after distance feels strategic. People sense strategy. She tried alignment, spoke my opinions before I did. Emma believes. Emma thinks speaking for someone who speaks for herself is exposure. Someone corrected her gently. Actually, I think Emma said something else. That correction did more damage than any accusation because it came from someone else. She stopped trying publicly and began withdrawing. Withdrawal is not surrender. It is regrouping. She watched, listened, waited. People who lose control become observers, and observers remember everything. I knew then that the next phase would not be about image. It would be about survival. Because once control fails, the only thing left is fear, and fear makes people careless. When fear replaces control, people expect conflict. They wait for accusations, for alliances, for lines to be drawn. None were. That was the most destabilizing outcome for my stepmother because she needed opposition to define herself without sides. There was no battlefield, only exposure. People did not confront her. They did not distance themselves dramatically. They simply adjusted. Conversations became shorter, plans less specific, decisions made without consultation. She was still present, but no longer necessary. Necessity is where power lives. She tried to provoke reaction, small comments, light criticisms, subtle corrections, testing to see who would defend her. No one did. Defense is automatic. Only when trust remains. She began asking directly, "Do you think I was too hard on Emma? Do you think I pushed too much?" Questions framed as reflection but loaded with expectation. People responded carefully. "You did what you thought was right. Parenting is hard. Every family is different." Careful answers. Avoid endorsement. Endorsement did not come. She looked at me differently now, not as someone to manage, but as a variable she could not calculate. Uncertainty terrifies strategists. At home she oscillated, some days distant, other days attentive too. Excess inconsistency made her visible in the wrong way. My father noticed but named it incorrectly. He called it stress. Stress is a word that absolves behavior by blaming circumstance. She accepted the label, wore it. I've been under a lot of stress lately. Stress explains tone, but not pattern. Patterns were already being observed. I never commented. Commentary would create sides. I remained neutral. Neutrality is often mistaken for weakness, but neutrality, when sustained, becomes authority. People began asking me questions, not about her, but about logistics. What time works for you? What do you think we should do? How do you want to handle this? They bypassed her. Bypassing is the clearest signal of lost trust. She felt it and panicked. Panic does not scream, it accelerates. She began making decisions quickly, without consensus. Speed is how people fake certainty. Those decisions were questioned, not aggressively, just quietly. "Are you sure? Did you check? Maybe we should wait." Waiting undermines control. She snapped once, just briefly, a sharp tone, a visible irritation. It lasted seconds, but seconds are enough. The room fell quiet. Silence after sharpness is collective evaluation. She smiled, immediately apologized over apology signals. Awareness of error. Error acknowledged is error remembered. After that, people treated her delicately. Delicacy is not respect. It is management. No one trusted her fully, but no one blamed her openly. She existed in a limbo, too involved to ignore too and stable. To rely on that state is unbearable for someone who wants to find the terms. She tried once more to force alignment. She said publicly, families should stand together no matter what. No matter what is an ultimatum disguised as virtue. No one echoed it. Virtues only work when shared. I watched her realize that loyalty could not be summoned. It had to be earned, and earning requires consistency. Consistency was gone from that moment. She stopped pushing. She withdrew, emotionally maintained. Function. Function without influence is hollow. She still attended, still participated, but her presence no longer shaped outcomes. That was the verdict. Not rejection, not punishment, irrelevance. And irrelevance is the quietest form of defeat. I did nothing, because there was nothing left to do. The system had adjusted, and systems, once adjusted, do not revert. I began planning my departure, not to escape, but to conclude. Because revenge is not about staying, it is about leaving at the right moment. Trust does not collapse. It thins, it becomes conditional, temporary, context dependent. My stepmother was still trusted with small things, logistics, pleasantries, surface level coordination, but not with meaning, not with decisions that mattered, not with interpretation, not with discretion. She noticed it first in the way conversations and dead people stopped finishing their thoughts. When she entered these simplified, summarized, closed, closure is a boundarish, was consulted late, after choices had already been shaped. Feedback instead of imputement, it creates ownership. Feedback creates compliance. It complied because compliance is how relevance is preserved. When authority is gone, she tried to regain trust through transparency. She explained processes, shared messages, copied people on emails. Visibility forced. Feels suspicious. Suspicion grew. Quietly, Simeone once said, I just want to double check. Double checking is mistrust disguised as diligence. She laughed it off. But laughter does not erase implication. Implication linger. She became predictable again, but not in the way she intended. Predictably anxious, predictably defensive, predictably eager to be seen as helpful. Help offered repeatedly without invitation became pressure. Pressure fractures trust completely. I watched her recalibrate constantly, never settling, never resting. Rest is a signal of security. Had Nani at home. She asked fewer questions but watched more. Observation without interaction is suspicion. Reversetti felt it but did not acknowledge it. Acknowledgement would create confrontation. Confrontation would give her structure. I gave her. Nanesh spoke about trust often in abstract terms. Show fragile it is, how easily misunderstood. People who speak about trust are often mourning its absension. Afternoon, she said to me almost casually, think people misunderstand me. Latilam and Sturston. Againi said, people notice patterns. The same sentence. Still Trush nodded as if accepting it. But acceptance without power is resignation. She began withdrawing from spaces where her influence no longer held. Declining invitations, arriving late, leaving early. Withdrawal reframed as dignity, but dignity does not need explanation. She explained it. I just don't want to interfere. I don't want to impose. Imposition is what trust once permitted. No, it did not. People responded kindly, but not urgent. Lichens without urgency is distantia. I realized then that no one feared her reaction. Animal fear is a form of influence. Soothe it. She was ordinary after dominance feels like loss. She tried one last time to establish authority, made a decision. Unilliterate lixipid compliance. Sempliant did not come. People asked questions, requested revisions, suggested alternative. She complied. That moment, that single moment completed the shift, because when someone who once commanded now negotiates trust has already left. She saw it too in the way no one apologized for disagreeing. Doesn't harm without apology is equality. Equality is devastating to those who were led. She stopped trying. After Thatnut publicly, internally fort drained from her voice. She still spoke, but without conviction. Conviction is contagious without it. Words fall flat. He watched her shrink, not physically but perceptually. People looked past her, not at her. Being unseen after being central is disorienting. She did not feel triumph. Triumph requires spectaclethus was quieter, more compulsive, because nothing could reverse. A trust does not regenerate. Once people learned they can function without Yowen, they had learned. Phaleries I did not leave abruptly. Abruptness suggests escape. I left cleanly, deliberately. I made arrangements quietly, changed addresses, shifted routines. No announcement, no explanation. Explanation invites debate. I informed my father briefly. He nodded as if relieved. Relief is often guilt that never learned how to speak. My stepmother asked no questions at first. Silence had become her language too. On my last evening, she stood in the doorway watching me pack, not interfering, not helping. Observation. Again she said, "You've always been very independent." Independence again. I said, "You taught me that." That sentence landed heavily because it was true. She asked finally, "Do you think I failed you?" Failure is measurable. This was not. I said, "I think you did what you needed to do." Need is not love. Need is survival. She nodded once. No tears. No accusations. Only something like recognition. Recognition without remedy. I left the next morning. No farewell gathering. No last breakfast. Rituals are for relationships. That will continue. Months passed. I heard about her indirectly. She was fine. People said, fine is neutral. Fine is survivable. She still participated, still attended, but never led, never shaped, never defined. She became someone people described briefly, without emphasis. That is what she lost. Not family, not home, not status. Narrative. She was no longer the interpreter of events. She was a footnote in her own story. I did not stay to witness it, because revenge is not watching. It is knowing. Knowing that the outcome does not require your presence, that the system will not revert once corrected. I built a life elsewhere, quiet, unremarkable, free, not because she was gone, but because she no longer mattered. And that was always the point.